Why, hello. Tonight, we are going to read the story of the precious gift. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 3 daughters. One day, one of them would be queen. The king could not decide which of them it should be, for they were all beautiful and they were all clever. I must make up my mind somehow, he said. I wonder what I could do. He thought, and at last he made a decision. I will ask each of my daughters to bring me a gift, he said, and the one who brings the most precious gift shall be queen. On the appointed day, he summoned them to the throne room. The eldest daughter brought a silver bird in a silver cage, which sang when a key was wound. A truly beautiful gift, murmured the king. The second daughter brought a robe of the finest silk, trimmed with the softest fur. Another truly beautiful gift, murmured the king. The third daughter brought a plain china bowl, which was so small it nestled in the palm of her hand. The king held his breath as he lifted the lid. What precious gift would he find inside it? When the king did see what was in the tiny bowl, his face went red, and then it went purple. How dare you, he shouted. He jumped to his feet and he threw the little bowl on the floor. How dare you insult me by bringing me common salt? But, the poor little princess tried to say something, but the king shouted, and the more he shouted, the more angry he became. Go, he shouted. Go and never come back. Never, never, never. Of course, he was sorry he had said what he had did when his temper had cooled down. By then, it was too late. The little princess had left the palace. She wandered sadly until she came to an inn. Please let me stay here, she begged. I have nowhere to go. I will work. I will do anything you ask. The innkeeper did not know she was a princess, or he would have given her his best room and waited on her himself. Instead, he sent her down to the kitchen to help the cook. The cook was a kindly woman. She taught the little princess all she knew about cooking. The princess was quick to learn, and before long, people were coming to the inn specifically to taste her pies and sample her soups and sauces. The kindly old cook was getting old, and gradually the little princess did more and more of the cooking until soon she was doing it all. Everyone who went to the inn talked for days afterwards about the delicious food eaten there, and it was only a matter of time before the king came to hear about the cook who could cook anything, and what more, they could cook it perfectly. She must come to work in the palace kitchens, he said. She is the best, and the king always has the best. And so it was. The king's own daughter worked in the palace kitchens and cooked the king's meals. And no one, least of all the king, had any idea who she really was. The day came when the king's eldest daughter was to be married. Such a hustle and bustle there was in the palace kitchens. Any banquet is important, but a wedding banquet is the most important of all, especially when a princess is marrying a prince. The little princess, who was now a cook, worked hard and long to get everything prepared. After the wedding, the king and his guests sat down at the tables in the banqueting hall, and the king clapped his hands. Let the banquet and merrymaking begin, he cried. The pages and the footmen filled the hall, carrying silver platters piled high with the most delicious food it had ever been the king's privilege to even see. "What a wonderful cook you must have," said a visiting emperor. The king felt so proud, and then, as was the custom, he lifted his fork and took the first bite of food. Everyone watched and waited for the sign that they too could begin to eat. To their astonishment, the king pulled his face and spat out the food. Princes and princesses, lords and ladies, footmen and pages stared at the king with open mouths as he tried the dishes. Dish after dish, scowling harder and harder with each mouthful he tasted. Suddenly he threw down his fork, and in a voice like thunder he shouted, "Fetch the cook!" He looked so angry, everyone trembled, even the visiting emperor, and he didn't frighten easily. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" echoed in whispers around the hall. The cook came and stood with her head bowed in front of the king, who by now was scarlet with rage. "You have cooked the food without salt," he roared. "The banquet is ruined. You have shamed me in front of my guests. How dare you forget something so important?" "But I did not forget," said the cook, who was really a princess. The king was so astonished at a humble cook daring to answer him back. He said nothing, and so she was able to continue. "A long time ago you banished a daughter because she gave you a gift of common salt." The king sat down with a bump on his chair. Yes, he did remember that. He had been very, very sorry ever since. But how did the cook know about it? He looked at her closely. Then she lifted her head so that he could see her face and smiled. The king jumped to his feet, scattering dishes with a clatter that he did not hear. "Daughter," he cried, "it's you! Can you ever forgive me? You truly gave me a scare. You gave me the most precious gift, and I was too foolish to know it." Of course the princess forgave her father, and the banquet was not spoiled because she had arranged that only the king's food had no salt. There was already more food prepared for him in the kitchen, and so the king and his daughter were reunited, and the princess once again took her rightful place in the palace. Good night, my kiddos. Grammy Jules loves you to pieces. Have sweet dreams.